Hello, and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And because March is upon us, it is time for the extravaganza in college basketball, the NCAA tournament. But before that, the seeding needs to be set. And in order to do that, we have to play all the conference tournaments. So leading up to the actual NCAA tournament, Tim and I will be running through most of the major conference tournaments. But before we get through the Power Six, we're going to be doing a little best of the rest video to highlight some of the more interesting conferences, some of the more interesting mid-major conferences, and highlight some teams and some tournaments that we think could really shake up the March Madness bracket. So, Tim, are you ready to go?
Let's run it.
All right. So we got three conferences that we're going to get through, the first of which being the West Coast Conference. How could we omit a conference with the number one ranked Gonzaga Bulldogs? One of the best teams in college basketball, and you're not going to cover them? Yeah, we're going to cover them. You know, Gonzaga, what can you say about them? They are college basketball's unstoppable powerhouse. Chet Holmgren, Drew Timme, Andrew Nembhard, they have stars, and they are looking to run it back and go right back to the national championship game. And hopefully this time they can win it. And it starts with a WCC title.
Yeah, I mean they're a team that is extremely offensively potent, I would say. They've got quite a few guys that can score the ball, starting with Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren. Of course, those are the guys that teams are going to focus in on and whatnot. They shoot the ball pretty well overall, 53% from the field, 38% from three, and 72.3% from the line. So in most cases, they are going to find ways to beat you on offense one way or another. But the thing with the Zags is we've seen them have so much success in the regular season over the years, but it's all about getting over that hump in March. And everybody thought that last year was going to be that year, and they made it all the way to the Natty, but then fell right at the last moment and whatnot. But it's going to be interesting to see is, will the challenges that they put themselves through this year be enough to prepare themselves for that consistency that is required in March? Because they have challenged themselves more this year. They've succeeded in some of them and fallen flat in some of those other ones. But I think they did purposely try with their non-conference scheduling to prepare themselves a bit better this year.
They definitely did. But as far as the West Coast Conference goes, Gonzaga is the class of this conference. It is theirs to lose.
Yeah.
Let's not.
It's impossible for them not to be the lock for.
Yeah. Let's not think this too much, but we got some more teams to cover. And the next of which is St. Mary's, the St. Mary's Gales. They are second in the WCC, and this is a team that is just locked down defensively. They don't need to score as much as other teams to win, but they can definitely beat you by locking you down offensively. We saw them in their win over Gonzaga, that St. Mary's has the horses to shake up and potentially be a bid stealer in this tournament and win the WCC. I mean, they're a projected 5 seed right now. They got Logan Johnson with 2.1 steals a game, which leads the conference. And St. Mary's is a very defensively sound team, and that's kind of been their identity the whole year, especially as of late.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the defense. They were the only team to keep Gonzaga under 80 points in their past 9 games, even before this last showing. So they're a very solid
57.
defensive team. Yeah, exactly. But saying before that game, they were also the only team that held Gonzaga under 80, which just shows you the dominance that Gonzaga's had. But in terms of St. Mary's, if you let them control the game with their defense, they're going to find a way to keep themselves in it on offense. They're good enough on offense to where their defense can carry them to wins that would not previously happen if their defense wasn't that good. Because their offense it has its streaky moments. They have some really good games, and they have some games where they struggle. But once again, you see this in the same way that Loyola Chicago, the Ramblers, found their way to the Final Four in the 2018 March Madness tournament. These teams are the extremely defensive-minded teams. They find their way to win games when it matters most, and that's a reason why St. Mary's can also have a real chance to shake up this WCC tournament as well if Gonzaga doesn't figure out how to sort of fix their shortcomings of this past matchup.
Mm-hmm. Well, after that, we got San Francisco, another WCC team that is looking for an at-large bid. And this is a team that's they're incredibly active, both in terms of shot volume and on the glass, because they lead the conference in both of those categories. They are an incredibly volatile team in terms of like tournament rankings, because you see them be as high as a 9 seed and they're as low as first 4 out. So it seems like various experts can't
decide how to feel about them.
Of the San Francisco Dons team. I mean, they're led by Jamari Bouye, Johan Masalski. They have some guys that can play well, but they're going to need a big WCC tournament in order to kind of cement themselves with an at-large bid.
Yeah, I think the thing about this Dons team is the fact that they do have 8 losses, which coming out of that conference, usually it's shaky at best. But part of it is most of their losses have been really close, and 6 of them have been within 5 points, and the other 2 were to Gonzaga, who has handled them mightily. So it's like,
context absolutely matters in that situation where,
because they haven't gotten blown out by very many teams. They've managed to keep a lot of games close. So it's like they're a team that doesn't make a whole lot of headlines, but they can bang with the best of them and play with a lot of the teams in their conference, even if some of the ones they fall short. But you're absolutely right that this conference tournament is going to be huge for them to sort of cement the fact that they can beat some of these teams that they've had some of these close losses to, and cement themselves as they belong in some of the lower half of the seeding wise of this national tournament. So it'll be very interesting to see what they're able to do in this tournament. But I would not be surprised if you see this team going on to either like the semifinal, or potentially, even if they have a magic one, you could see them in the championship game.
Yeah, I mean, another team that needs a really, really big conference tournament is the BYU Cougars. I mean, they're sitting at 21-9. They're 5th in WCC. I mean, they're a team that is good enough to be like one of the last 4 in, but they need more. They need more quality wins, and a strong WCC tournament is exactly what they need. Say they go beat a team like San Francisco, or they beat a Santa Clara, which is actually ahead of them in the WCC standings. If BYU can make it to the WCC finals, then I think maybe that'll be good enough. Maybe they can steal, but this team just needs more. That is just generally what I get from this BYU team.
Yeah, they're a team that, in terms of like Selection Sunday and the way that the committee works, it's a combination of your previous record as well as like how you're playing at the time. If you're a team that has had some struggles during the year, you need to prove why, if they put you in this, that you are going to be able to battle with whoever you're up against. That's always the goal of this tournament, is to put the best 64 teams in this thing. So they need to prove that they're going to be able to battle with whoever they would face up in this tournament. So they do need some statement wins in terms of the WCC tournament, and just in general, whatever games they have left in their regular season here, to prove that they have enough of those like quad 1, quad 2 wins to warrant them scraping in the very bottom there. But right now, they just don't quite have enough.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we mentioned Santa Clara. Santa Clara, it's like really what you see is what you get. I mean, they'll lose to teams better than them, but they'll beat the teams that, they're better than. So there's really not much more to say other than that. But Tim, in terms of who's going to win the WCC tournament, who do you have?
I mean, I have Gonzaga. It's impossible not to.
Yeah.
Once again, you don't want to overthink it. I see them adjusting to whatever shortcomings they had against St. Mary's this previous game. I don't see them having any real resistance up until the championship game. Maybe the championship game might be a little interesting depending who gets there and how the seeding works for the tournament. But I see the Zags pretty much running away with this one.
Yeah, that's kind of who I got also. I mean, as much as I'd like to say St. Mary's or San Francisco to play the spoiler.
It's always fun to play the little devil's advocate. And be
Gonzaga is going to demolish this thing, and especially with the style of bracket that the tournament has, which is very, very weird. I mean, they only have to play 2 games in order to win, so it's very much favored for teams like, St. Mary's and Gonzaga. So yeah, it's really not that much of a decision. After that, we have the second conference that we're going to get into. Arch Madness is here. That is the earliest of the conference tournaments that, we're going to cover. the Missouri Valley. I think that's another fun local Midwestern conference to cover. And this conference is really interesting because it's a big game of rock, paper, scissors at the top. The four, Loyola, Northern Iowa, Drake, and Missouri State, they're just kind of beating each other up late in the regular season. So it's very much up for grabs. And the first team that I want to go over is the Ramblers. I mean, they've been slipping as of late, and they need a good conference tournament showing in order to gain that at-large bid, just in case they don't win this thing. And their first game coming up is against Bradley, and Loyola will be out for revenge because the last time Loyola and Bradley met, Bradley beat them. And that's when Bradley kind of crashed the party in the top four teams, and they were just kind of at fifth. I'm here too, but Loyola's going to need a good tournament.
Yeah, for sure. They're a team that's at 22-7 right now, but they do have 5 losses in conference. So they have struggled a little bit in conference play here. Of course, this is a team like they're known for their stifling defense. Of course, that's kind of been the motto of this team over the last couple of years. But they have a little bit of a twist this year in the fact that they do have a little bit more in terms of offense than they usually had. They have had quite a few games where they've gotten over 80 points, and in their most recent game, which was an overtime loss to Northern Iowa, they lost 102-96. So they've proven that they can score the ball when they're having good games, but sometimes it's whether or not they can pair their defense with that. They definitely need a lot more in terms of getting themselves firmly in the tournament if they don't actually win the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. I can see them pulling it out, but they need to turn some things around. They've struggled a little bit lately, but they've got the type of balanced team that if they figure the things out and get the ball rolling again, they really can mess some teams up and put some people on notice once again. But they've got to be able to get there first.
Yeah, I think that's the real key for Loyola, and a team that is quietly taken the Missouri Valley regular season, won that title, Northern Iowa. They have been hot lately. They've won 9 out of their last 10, and they've squeaked atop the MVC. They have a deep bench led by AJ Green. No, not that AJ Green, the other AJ Green. Thank you. And Northern Iowa is a team that, AJ Green is going to lead them, and it's a rock, paper, scissors game. So they're also another team that's pretty inconsistent. So we'll see what we get from them.
Yeah, they're a pretty star-heavy team with AJ Green and Noah Carter pretty much taking the brunt of the scoring, both averaging 15-plus points a game, and no one else other than that averaging above 10. So it's like it all depends on the way that defenses kind of hone in on those guys. When it comes tournament time, as you're focusing on everything you got on one opponent, so that their teams are going to be throwing the kitchen sink at those two guys, trying to figure out how to stop them. But
as far as Northern Iowa goes, they're going to need to win this tournament in order to make the NCAA tournament, because at 10 losses, 18-10 losses major, you're not going to get an at-large regardless. So it's kind of do or die here for Northern Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the key for them is going to be what version of their offense are they going to be? Because you talked about inconsistency and why they have 10 losses. Offensively, they're either on or off. They've had quite a few games up in the 80s and even 90s, but also had quite a few in the 50s and 60s. So it's like they're going to need to get that offense going and consistently throughout all of these games to make that deep run and win their conference tournament so that they can actually secure this bid overall. It's going to be a bit of a tough road for them, but they've got the offense to do it. It's just whether or not they can figure out that consistency issue.
Mm-hmm. And after that, you have another inconsistent team in the MVC, Drake. And Drake is a team that's just been up and down and up and down. They're not as strong as they were last year, but they're still pretty well-rounded. But they'll lose 3 and then they'll win 5, and you just don't know what to make heads or tails of this Drake team. Which Drake Bulldog team is going to show up in St. Louis for the Missouri Valley tournament? Is it going to be the one that's won the last 5 in a row, or is it going to be the one that's lost 3 straight?
Yeah, once again, I mean, and that's kind of the the big problem with teams in general is always going to be consistency, because you've got most college basketball teams that we're at least going to be talking about that are up at the top here. They have the ability to play some really good basketball, but the problem is can they do that consistently? When it comes tournament time, it's do or die. So you can't have off games, or at least you can't have like really, really bad ones where you really aren't able to turn it around at all. But in terms of the way their team is built, they're a pretty balanced team. So it's like when they're on, they're able to have different guys contribute in a whole lot of different ways. But it's just whether or not they're on at the right time. And like you said, what version of that Drake roster comes out in any given night.
Yeah. And then we got the last team of the Big Four in the MVC, the Missouri State Bears. And this is a team that I actually like entering the Missouri Valley tournament and into March, because this team has a ton of star power. And if they put it all together, they can be very dangerous. They're the best rebounding team in the conference, despite being led by elite guard play. Like Isaiah Mosley and Donovan Clay, they each rank in the top 5 in the conference in rebounding. They're both guards. And then they have Gage Prim down low that can wreak absolute havoc. So yeah, he's big mean, big Bears, big basketball. And that is how Missouri State rolls. I like the Bears.
Yeah. I mean, they're a very solid team. I think one of the things that really does work out into their favor is offensively, they shoot well percentage wise. I mean, you're looking at 48.5% from the floor, 30, almost just shy of 38% from three, and then almost 80% from the line. And one of the things we've seen from a lot of games recently in college basketball, and it's always true come tournament time, both conference and national, free throws can be really, really important in some of these games that are
got to make your free throws down the stretch. Have to.
So having those guys where they've got a couple of guys that shoot high 80s, even low 90s percentage wise, those are the guys that are going to be key. If you need to get the ball in, it's like that you just got to have a guy catch the ball so they can get fouled and knock down free throws. This Missouri State team has got it. So it's like they've got a lot of pieces that look like positives, even though they have lost a decent amount of games this year, if they start putting those pieces together at the right time.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the top 4 goes, that's kind of how the Missouri Valley Conference is going to shake out at the end. And I just want to give a quick second to mention the Illinois State Redbirds and the season that they have had. And because quite frankly, they went as far as Antonio Reeves could take them, which is not very far, especially when your coach gets fired midway through the season. Antonio Reeves, 20.2 points per game. He led the conference. And yeah, it's a rough season for the Redbirds, and hopefully they could bring someone in after they fired Dan Muller halfway through the season, a well-respected coach. And I love my Redbirds, but they did not have a very good season. Hopefully they could shake some things up in Arch Madness, but who knows?
Can't exactly be too optimistic about it, but hey, that's why you play the game.
Exactly. Anything can happen. So that's all we got from the Missouri Valley. But first, like, who's going to win? Who's going to win the Missouri Valley? Who do you have, Tim?
You know, it's tough because you got a lot of teams around here that, like, you talk about the consistency issue, and you got a lot of positives, but you got some teams that have some pretty highlighted negatives. But I've actually got Loyola Chicago turning around and putting together a good tournament. They're a team that over the past couple of years, they've got experience. And they've got guys that have been able to make some noise at the highest level. Now, granted, I think the big thing for this program is the fact that they have got an identity as a program. Now, granted, that identity was essentially created by former coach Porter Moser, and then is handed down to Drew Valentine. But I think that they're going to be able to figure things out in terms of the tournament aspect and what it takes to grind out games that may not necessarily be going your way. So I think the Ramblers are actually going to get this one and punch their ticket in.
Yeah. And as interesting as a pick that is, I'm actually going to disagree with you here. I kind of gave it away earlier in my evaluations of the teams who I pick. I have Missouri State. I mean, the old saying goes, the valley runs deep, the competition is steep. And in the 4-way rock, paper, scissors game, I like Missouri State's star power and their guard play to come out above the rest. So I got the Bears.
Hey, they're a very solid team, and it's very hard to ignore the positives that they have, the very specific positive that not a whole lot of teams can say that they have. But once again, it'll be fun to watch, and that's why you play these games, because anything can happen.
The last conference that we're going to cover is the Mountain West, and the Mountain West is going to be a very interesting team to cover, conference to cover, because
the Mountain West team.
Well, they have 4 teams that could potentially be making the tournament, and we're going to cover all 4, because as far as the Mountain West Conference tournament goes, those are the 4 that are really going to be at the top, and the last 4 standing. So the first one that we're going to go over is Boise State. They have the first seed in the Mountain West so far, and they're a scrappy team that has somehow being the operative word there, found a way to win games and sit atop the Mountain West. They're projected 8 seed right now. I think the best example that I have of them somehow finding a way to win games, and it makes me laugh, the fact that this was even a score. This was basketball, not football, against San Diego State at San Diego State, 42-37. Somebody had to win that game. And that was the game that
neither one really appeared to deserve it based on that scoreline.
Yeah. And that was the game that kind of like really stuck out. And I'm like, all right, you're finding a way to win games. I respect it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for the epitome of all over the place in the form of a college basketball team, you look no further than Boise State. They have a solid record in both conference and overall play. But they've just got some odd holes and odd stat lines and score lines throughout the year that it's kind of like, if you're looking from the outside, it's like, what's going on here? Because it's like on paper, they appear to be a pretty balanced offensive team. You've got 4 guys averaging 10 plus points a game. But a problem for them is, as a team, they're only averaging 69 points per game. While they have some explosive offensive outings of like 80 plus, with a couple of completely atrocious ones, like the one you talked about. And they also have a loss to CSU Bakersfield, where they only put up 39. So it's not even like that was the one time where they had like a really, really atrocious offensive performance. So it's like, you don't really know what to look at this team. And I think out of all the teams we've even talked about today, they're, I think, the team that worries me the most in terms of inconsistency biting them in the butt, because they appear to be the most inconsistent of all of them, really. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, I don't know if you came across this, is the team dynamic is particularly weird with this team and the way they've been able to still keep their record, because they do have a guy, or I will say had a guy, by the name of Devonair, I believe it is Dutrive. I don't know. I apologize.
I did see that, actually.
Very interesting story out of Boise State, because he was a former top 100 recruit who was an All Mountain West honorable mention pick last season after averaging 9.1 points a game, or it was around 9 or 10 points, I believe, after transferring from Arizona. But he struggled mightily opening the season, averaging 9 points a game in 28 minutes in the 7 games that he played for the Broncos this season.
It sounds like me and intramurals.
Well, I don't know about if this is you, but shooting a poor 23% from 3 and a scary 43.8% from the field overall.
I wasn't that bad.
So after one of their early season losses to St. Louis, their coach Leon Rice hinted that he wasn't really buying into the team goals, and soon after he was removed from the team overall. So he only played those 7 games. So it's like, in terms of kind of turmoil as a program, they're certainly up there. You don't usually hear about that very often. So,
well, I think that's just a testament to them to come away with the Mountain West regular season title.
Yeah. But
the next team that we're going to go through is a breath of fresh air in terms of being clean, because we got Colorado State 23-4, all of those losses coming in conference play. So a spotless out of conference record, and they're a very clean team. They play complete games from start to finish. They've been consistently excellent in crunch time, and that can be the decider when it comes to late games in March. They're projected 6th seed and led by David Roddy, who's leading the Mountain West in field goal percentage. I think this is the best team in the conference right now. So I like Colorado State going into the tournament, both conference and NCAA.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to look at this team and not highlight the play of David Roddy. I mean, he's a 6'5" guard who does a little bit of everything for this team. He averages 19.4 a game, 7.7 rebounds, 2.9 assists, and even 1.1 blocks per game. So as a guard, I mean, it's hard to ask for more out of a guy on your team there. But he's a very fun player to watch. And one of the things that I think that I like the most about him is his efficiency. Not only is a high volume scorer, rebounds the ball, does all that, dishes out when he needs to, but he shoots 57% from the field, incredible 47.3 from three. But the only shortcoming I think he has is only shooting 70.5% from the free throw line. But overall, he's just a very efficient scorer that really appears that he's got a really good feel for the game, knows what he needs to do at any given moment. And having him at the helm of this team has really been a big point of emphasis for why this team has had so much success this season.
Yeah, he's going to lead Colorado State as far as they're going to go. But we still got two more teams in this conference to cover, and the next of which is Wyoming. And the way I see Wyoming is they are incredibly top heavy. Hunter Maldonado, Drake Jeffries, and Graham Ike lead the way. But other than that, there's really not much there. And they're not as deep as some of the teams in the conference, and that can be their undoing. They're projected an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament right now, but I think the lack of depth can really do them in.
Yeah, you're 100% right on this one, because it's like, yeah, you look at Graham Ike and Hunter Maldonado as their two main guys and whatnot. Ike obviously averaging 20.7 points a game. That's fantastic. But the question is can those two guys do it game in and game out when you know that the focus is going to be entirely on you? Just a little bit of like number crunching and whatnot. They combine for 53% of the team's points, just those two guys. They shoot a combined 52% from the field, while the rest of the team shoots just under 42%. So it's like we've seen teams get dragged through both conference and national tournament by like a star player or their couple star players. But it's also really hard to do that in terms of on a consistent basis. And that's why you see teams like that oftentimes fall short. So they're a very fun team to watch in terms of if they're on, they're on. But like you said, that depth is quite possibly going to be their undoing, because who's going to step it up when teams are doing their very best to take those two guys away? So that's going to be the real question for this Wyoming team.
A lot of question marks surrounding a Wyoming Cowboys team that can find themselves on the bubble if they don't perform in the MWC tournament.
Yeah.
The last team we got, though, the San Diego State Aztecs. They're projected a 10 seed, and the way I see it for San Diego State just could be summed up in one word: blah. A lot of blah, because their spot in the field is pretty much more or less set. None of their losses are too terrible, but none of their wins are too impressive. I mean, they're led by Matt Bradley, Nathan Mensah, and Kashad Johnson. They're down low. They're doing their thing. But San Diego State, they're just kind of average.
They're just kind of
That's why I used the word blah to describe them.
So. Yeah, I mean, they're yet another team plagued by inconsistency and poor shooting. And that's what's caused some of their very poor performances and caused them to drop 7 games throughout this season. But they've played good basketball at times, and that's what's been able to earn themselves the current projected 10 seed in the tournament. So it's like, what are they gonna do? Because you see a lot of good things, but you also see a lot of poor. They're not a fantastic shooting team. I'd say the one thing that they've got going for them is defense can sometimes be the shining star for them. They average 8 steals and almost 5 blocks a game. So it's like, I think that's what really keeps them in the game, and some of the games that their offense really kind of takes a backseat. But it's hard to see this team going very far, and we'll see, depending on how the tournament goes in this last week of the regular season, whether or not that all the games that they have won will actually be able to cement themselves in. It's possible they could see themselves turn closer to a bubble team by the end of this. So it's like, it's hard to tell, but I can't say that they're one of my favorite teams in terms of a lock to win something or make a deep run in either of these tournaments.
They're not really that interesting. And
no,
that's kind of what gets me about San Diego.
They don't have the big star. They don't have a big side of the ball where they play really, really well. They kind of they're like a mediocre jack of all trades. They're like, yeah, we can do everything kind of decently. but also we can surprise you and be terrible.
Oh, yes. Kind of like all these teams can. But with all that being said, who will win the Mountain West at the end of the day?
I mean, you see like these four teams, and this is a conference that has four teams that have a chance of making the tournament. Not a whole lot of conferences have that. But even with all the different records, like you said, it's so hard to look past the positives of Colorado State. I mean, they're just a really solid team with the way that their team is fit and the guys that they've got and the way that team plays. So it's really hard for me to look past them. And even the two teams that are above them in the conference, I just think that the inconsistency is going to bite them. And I feel like Colorado State's going to have what it takes to grind out some of these games. I think that's why they have only 4 losses. So I don't know. It's really hard based on the fact that they're not even first in their conference. So it's not like they should be the lock pick when you just look at records and whatnot. But taking a deeper dive into how these teams are built, Colorado State looks like they're going to be the team to beat.
Yeah, you pretty much said it all. They're led by David Roddy. We've talked a lot about him previously. They know how to play. They're the cleanest team right now. They look like the best overall team right now. So I'm going to have to agree with you. Keep it short, keep it sweet, and go Colorado State.
You know, the one other thing that I didn't even point out, the fact that despite all the efficiency that they have, that is very good and whatnot, they're also a team that doesn't turn the ball over a lot. And that is always going to be huge in tournament play. They averaged exactly 10 turnovers a game. And a big thing for coaches, a lot of coaches really focus on the fact of trying to keep their teams under 10 turnovers a game. That's always a goal, is keep them at single digits. So to have them at exactly 10 turnovers a game shows the fact that they are a pretty solid team in terms of turning the ball over and keeping possessions in their control.
Yeah. So that's what we got for those 3 conferences in the best of the rest. But I'm just going to speed through some other March Madness mid-major teams that we can watch out for, because there are so many more conferences out there in college basketball that we missed.
Yeah, there's 64 teams that are going to make this whole thing. So
right. So I'll just run through some pretty briefly. Murray State, they're 28-2. They completed a perfect Ohio Valley season. They've only lost to Auburn and East Tennessee on the road. They've essentially punched their ticket as an at-large bid regardless. The Davidson Wildcats, they've rattled off 4 in a row handily. They've beaten Alabama. They can strengthen their case with wins against George Mason and Dayton down the stretch. Iona, Slick Rick Pitino, they have that squad fighting for an at-large bid. They're 24-5, 16-2 in conference play, and they're perfect at home. And some help in the conference tournament could mean a punch ticket to March. And South Dakota State, 27-4, 18-0 in summit play. They are streaking. And this SD State team is making a case for themselves with their red hot finish to the regular season. So that's just a quick look at some other teams that we got.
Definitely teams to look out for, because you never know with where they're going to be placed or whether or not they will be placed at all come Selection Sunday.
Yeah. So that's all we got for our best of the rest video. We will have other conference breakdowns coming up. We're going to be doing all of the Power 6, so stay tuned for that, and other college basketball content here on Running the Table. So until next time, like and subscribe, and we out.